Good afternoon. You're watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jes Delos Santos. Let's take a look at how the local bourse closed today, Friday. Okay, the PSEi ending the week on a higher, closing at its highest level yet since February 2020, up by 1.9% to 7,340, extending gains to a fourth day here. That's amid, of course, the easing of restrictions in Metro Manila to alert level 2, its most relaxed yet since the pandemic broke out. And this, of course, as inflation surprised in October, slipping to easing to 4.6%. Now, Jonathan Rabella's chief strategist over at BDO says optimism that economic prospects will still show an improvement with inflation slowing and infections coming down is boosting this bullishness here on the index. He's saying as well that the slower inflation gives a BSP more room to keep interest rates accommodative. He's saying that the PSEi can test the 7,400 level. Now, looking at our leaders and laggards for the day, majority of the 30-member index advanced, save for just 3 stocks here. Mall operators are having a field day today. This, of course, as minors are now allowed to enter malls. You have Robinson's Land climbing the most, up 6.5%. This, as the Gokongwei stock also approved 3 billion pesos worth of share buyback transactions. You also have your other players here. Our largest mall operator, SM Prime, also in the green, up 4 2/10%. Same with Ayala Land, ending the day higher by 2 3/10%. Jollibee, also our food operator, is up by 2.5%. Bloomberry also in the green after it reported the third quarter net loss was slashed by more than half. ICTSI likewise ending on the upside here, 5 2/10% after reporting a 73% increase in profit during the July to September period. Now, here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The BSP is expecting full-year inflation to exceed its 2 to 4% target as supply issues continue to push prices higher. Now, despite this, the central bank maintains that it will focus on non-monetary policy interventions to ease domestic supply constraints. In the medium term, BSP says it's ready to maintain its accommodative monetary policy stance for as long as necessary to support economic recovery. Meanwhile, the NEDA says that the government will also continue to pursue measures to enhance the availability of key goods like rice, fish, and pork. These include the ramping up of pork importation to bring down prices to pre-ASF levels. As for the rising fuel prices, the government says its 1 billion peso cash grant for affected PUV drivers and the increase in allowed capacity can help support the transport sector. Now, the SSS is rolling out 4 relief and restructuring programs for borrowers with overdue payments on salary and housing loans. One of these is the Contribution Condonation Penalty Program, which allows employers to pay overdue SSS contributions in full or by installment over 4 to 24 months without penalties. Another is the Housing Loan Restructuring and Penalty Condonation Program, which allows qualified housing loan borrowers, successors in interest, and legal heirs to pay outstanding principal interest, insurance dues, legal expenses within 90 days from their notice of approval. Other programs launched by the SSS are the Enhanced Installment Payment Program and the Short-Term Member Loan Penalty Condonation Program. And the Philippine Amalgamated Supermarkets Association expects prices of Noche Buena items to rise by 4 to 8%. The group's president, Stephen Kua, said prices of selected foods for Noche Buena could see increases of up to 2 pesos depending on the size of the product. Kua said price increases for such food items will need to be carefully managed because they will affect the entire supply chain. The Trade Department has earlier said that only 4 of its tracked 11 Noche Buena product categories are covered by active price hike petitions, including ham, tomato sauce, pasta, and cream. With lots of news and data to digest today, from easing of movement here in Metro Manila to inflation surprising on the downside. Let's discuss that and more with Calixto Chikiamco, an economist and Businessworld columnist. Thank you for joining us, Sir Calixto.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so how much of a surprise was that October inflation for you, easing to 4.6%, of course, compared to September figures?
Well, it's a bit of a surprise in the sense that fuel prices have been surging, and we were expecting food prices to really go up, you know, because of the weather-related disturbances and of course the problems, the continuing problems with ASF for pork, So, but still, it's above the central bank's target of 2 to 4%.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you mentioned it. Food inflation at least is lower than expected, but should we at least expect upticks in the coming months as spillover from that series of oil price increases?
Well, it already increased by 32%, I think, the last time. So um, I don't think it will still increase by very much. Although I expect it to increase because fuel prices will probably go up as we head to winter months and demand for gas goes up in Europe and other Western countries.
Hmm. Now, like what you mentioned, also inflation still elevated year to date, but the BSP is maintaining its pause. For how long can the BSP hold on to current rates?
Well, I guess they have no choice because the bigger problem is still the high unemployment and underemployment, and of course, business continuing to see uh, you know poor local demand because of the mobility restrictions. Of course, we're uh, uh, recently the IATF has downgraded us to level 2, and there will be uh, looser restrictions, and we should expect growth really to pick up. No,
Mhm.
so I guess that's we can expect that BSP will still maintain its accommodative stance.
Mhm. For how long do you think, sir?
Until we can say that the economy has recovered to near normal because
Mhm.
um, the unemployment, underemployment figures show that we're still very far from being having a normal status. At the same time, we can't say for sure that this easing of restrictions will continue. Even
Mhm.
if as we are seeing now in Europe, they're seeing now an uptick in cases, and some restrictions have been restored. So same thing with Singapore. Although 85% of their population have been vaccinated, they're seeing a record number of cases. So
Mhm.
we can't say that this easing of restrictions will continue.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned it also earlier. Again, September unemployment highest so far this year. But should we be expecting improvements moving forward, especially since Metro Manila has east to alert level 2, and you also have other areas outside NCR already at least implementing or enforcing the alert level system?
Well, of course, we will see some recovery of jobs as businesses reopen, no, with the alert level 2. Yeah, yes, but I think we're still going to be far from pre-pandemic levels.
Mhm. Much of the dip as well, or much of the joblessness rate, at least for the month of September, was from the agriculture and manufacturing sector. Do you think that they would at least be able to catch up in the coming months?
Um, well, it's. I think they'll be able to certainly increase production, but
Hmm.
whether they will be able to catch up is another question altogether. As I said, uh, we have a lot of ground to cover to be able to go back to pre-pandemic levels.
Now, sir, the BSP also is of the opinion that there are no clear signs yet of second round effects on fares and wages due, of course, to inflation. Do you agree or do you subscribe to this thought?
Yes, so far, I guess the government is trying to mute the demand for increased fare hikes by uh, by targeted subsidies. So far, there's been no second round effects. But again, how long they can maintain this is another question altogether.
Mhm. Now, speaking of again oil price increases, you mentioned at least so far the discounts and the ayuda, the cash aid that they are giving to PV drivers somehow will help temper at least those increases. But for how long do you see oil prices increasing?
As I said, well, one factor of the driving up prices really has been, the increased demand abroad, no,
Mhm.
as they also recover and loosen the restrictions. So, and at the same time, with winter coming, there'll be increased demand for natural gas, which will also spill over into gasoline. No, so I think we will see at least high level of prices. I'm
Mhm.
not saying further increases, but high level
Mhm.
of fuel prices at least until the winter months.
Mhm. Okay. Now, also one move that's being pushed for at least in Congress is the suspension of the excise taxes on oil. Would this be a wise move at this stage?
I don't think it would be a wise move because where will the government get the money from the foregone revenues to be able to pay for uh, you know the budget for addressing the pandemic? So I think it's not a wise move to reduce all taxes at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
A targeted subsidy is much better because if this if you also lower all taxes, would be against the move toward taxing carbon actually.
Mhm. Now, how much do we expect to gain with NCR now finally easing to alert level 2 here? I mean, we have no way of saying at least as to how long this will be put in place, but so far, at least based from your understanding of the restrictions under alert level 2, how much do we expect to gain from this?
In terms of economic growth,
Mm-hmm.
well, I think the government is still targeting 4 to 6%, but I think it's still kind of hard considering we are already in the middle of November, so we just have 1.5 months to go. In travel restrictions are still in place from countries like the United States, right? So they are still under no, they have to quarantine themselves. So I think it will be very difficult for the government to achieve its targeted growth rate.
Okay, but given that as well, third quarter GDP figures set to be released next week. What are your projections?
I I, I don't have any specific projections at this point in time.
Mhm. But are you expecting a bit of a surprise, or would you say it's going to be at least some decent level of growth at least for the period?
Well, at least there'll be some decent level of growth, at least with the level 3 that we have had. Um, at least you can see it even in the traffic in EDSA that there's been increased mobility also, especially from the hard lockdown that we had in early August.
Now, last question. We're expecting, of course, election year 2022. Should we be expecting some push here from election spending, or will this be very different from how it used to be at least pre-pandemic?
Again, it depends on the situation, whether uh, there will be restrictions on rallies, on crowds, which will
Mhm.
of course limit the kind of spending that you will see.
Mhm.
Um But that's still in May yet, so
Yeah.
still a long way to go to, uh, But to my mind, one issue in these elections would really be inflation.
Mhm.
Although the inflation is about what 4.6%, the food inflation is much higher. It's 5.6, and for the poor, the inflation is it's much higher for the poor. The effects of food inflation.
All right. Thank you very much for your insights again, Calixto Chikiamco, economist and business world columnist. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And those are the biggest stories this trading day, November 5, 2021. Catch Business World live again Monday next week at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jes Delos Santos, and we are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe. Philippines, have a great weekend.